On November 6 of 2010, Chapman was demoted from the rank of sergeant to police officer. This was not due to his behavior, however due because the funds were not available for the city at that point. So they had to cut different positions from the Galveston Police Department. And if during the next year, if any position becomes vacant, it will be filled from the position from the officers that were demoted. Chapman was placed on administrative leave with pay for an unknown reason. Here it states you are relieved of your official duties with the Galveston Police Department with pay. You were not to perform any other duties of your office during this time, and you may not continue with any outside employment that depends on your official status in this department. And below signs Archie Chapman and Charles Wiley, the Chief of Police. On April 1st, 2011, Chapman finds himself yet in another internal affairs investigation. Keep in mind that he was on administrative leave with pay on March 2nd, 2011. This incident happens a day after he was placed on administrative leave with pay. On March 3rd of 2011, Chapman participated in a ride-along with the Montgomery County Sheriff Office. Chapman assisted two MCSO deputies in the execution of a felony warrant in the city of Porter, Texas. Chapman deployed his taser on a wanted subject during the execution of that warrant. Chapman also wore his Galveston Police Department uniform during that ride-along, and he failed to receive authorization from his superiors before riding along with another agency as a representative of the Galveston Police Department. During the interview with Chapman, he freely admitted his failure to inform his superiors of his plan to ride with an MCSO and his decision to wear his GPD uniform. The city of Porter, Texas, is clearly outside the legal authority of the city of Galveston. Chapman's uniform participation with the MCSO ride-along program was not sanctioned by Chief Wiley or part of a mutual agreement between GPD and MCSO. Unaware of Chapman's intentions, neither Chief Wiley nor his supervisory staff were able to prohibit the officer from voluntarily acting as an agent of the Galveston Police Department in another jurisdiction. Chapman's failure to seek proper authorization may have unnecessarily placed the department in the city of Galveston in jeopardy of a civil liability from the subject on whom he used force. He willingly brought liability upon himself, the department, and the city of Galveston. Chapman did not encounter Ronald McPike by happenstance. Instead, he made a series of conscious choices that increased the likelihood of his need to use force against the subject. Chapman stated it was his opinion to wear his GPD uniform. This automatically made him a representative of GPD during all contacts with residents of Porter, Texas. He also neglected to notify a GPD supervisor of his intentions to participate in a uniform ride-along with MCSO. Chapman claimed that he asked his friend if MCSO would allow him to wear his uniform during the ride-along. His reasoning for asking? I didn't want to assume anything. That was enough forethought to realize his uniform participation could be problematic. However, he failed to apply the same logic to his current employer. During the interview with Chapman, his responses was evidence that he had the presence of mind to question whether his actions will be acceptable to the department. It should be mentioned that Chapman spent a short term as a GPD sergeant. He was demoted through no fault of his own. In order to promote Chapman, he was required to educate himself and pass a series of tests on information he learned from a number of publications. At the very least, he should have grasped the basic concepts of consulting supervisor to clarify any departmental rules for which he was unsure of. I asked Chapman why he failed to ask a GPD supervisor for permission to participate in a uniform ride-along. Chapman responded, "I didn't know if there was anything in that policy that said we had to." Also in his interview, Chapman was asked if our department had any policy which would prohibit personnel from participating in a uniform ride-along with an outside agency. Chapman replied, "I'm sure there is." Chapman's statement strongly suggested that he considered the possible existence of departmental rules governing this type of activity. Still, the officer failed to seek clarification or approval from his superiors. Chapman's involvement in this incident showed a failure to conform to the work standards established for this position as a Galveston police officer. During his tenure with GPD, Chapman has amassed a rather lengthy record for violating departmental directives, rules, and procedures. Records show a total of 7 investigations for 9 separate violations. Of those investigations, 2 were exonerated and 2 were not sustained, and 5 were sustained. He has received a total of 17 days without pay. Chapman's most recent reprimand occurred on December 10, 2010. Chief Wiley warned Chapman that continued disciplinary problems could result in receiving an indefinite suspension. Chapman may have acted at the direction of his friend, however, his authority was assumed and not officially received from the proper authority within that jurisdiction. MCSO Patrol Commander Captain Rand Henderson provided a copy of their ride-along application and release of liability forms that were signed by Chapman and then notarized. The forms clearly documented that a participant's capacity during a ride-along was that of an unarmed lay observer and bystander with no active role whatever. Captain Henderson explained that the ride-along rules apply to all participants, including sworn officers from other jurisdictions. Captain Henderson was upset with his employee who lacked the authority to allow Chapman to respond to calls in official capacity. Chapman has repeatedly engaged in behaviors which demonstrated patterns of bad judgment and poor impulse control. Past failures to correct his deficiencies have given me serious concerns whether to allow Chapman continue serving as a sworn member with the Galveston Police Department. Therefore, I believe that an indefinite suspension is warranted. And at the bottom of that incident, Chapman's signature and Charles Wiley, Chief of Police.